There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't show up in medical reports or leave bruises you can see. Instead, it buries itself deep in the nervous system. It disguises itself in overachieving, people-pleasing, avoidance, rage, or numbing. And most cruelly, it convinces you it was always your fault. This is the wound Carl Jung knew would go ignored by society. The wound born in childhood. The one formed not in moments of dramatic abuse, but in subtle, repeated violations of the soul. It's the look that told you to be quiet, the love that disappeared when you didn't perform, the boundaries that didn't exist, or the expectations that smothered you. It's what happens when the people who raise you don't see you, don't hear you, don't honor you, because they've never seen or honored themselves. They were living in their own unconscious shadows, still haunted by the voices of their parents, repeating cycles they never even questioned. Jung saw these patterns not as individual failures, but as archetypal inheritances. Each generation becomes the unknowing vessel of the last. Its trauma, its fear, its unlived desires, until someone decides to break the spell. But breaking the spell hurts, because first, you have to admit that what shaped you was not love. It may have looked like love. It may have worn the mask of family, protection, or tradition. But if love taught you to abandon yourself, it wasn't love. It was control. It was projection. It was the adult's unhealed wounds passed down to you, in the language of shame and silence. Jung famously said, "Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent." And it's true. You didn't just inherit their genetics. You inherited the guilt they never confronted, the self-doubt they buried, the dreams they gave up on, the emotional repression they were forced to adopt to survive. You were handed a soul contract you never agreed to. Carry this for me. Feel this for me. Become what I couldn't. And being the child you were, wide-eyed, trusting, open, you said yes. You didn't know any better. You couldn't know any better. Children don't have the luxury of objectivity. They don't see dysfunction. They see themselves as the problem. So when Dad was always angry, when Mom disappeared into depression, when love felt conditional, when emotions were punished, you thought you were too loud, too needy, too sensitive, too dramatic. You learned how to fragment yourself, to keep the connection alive. And that fragmentation becomes the root of the shadow, because the parts of you that weren't acceptable, the emotional one, the expressive one, the wild one, the angry one, the one who wanted to be held, they didn't die. They went underground. They became exiled in your unconscious, pushed into the basement of your psyche. And like all things abandoned, they began to rot and grow fangs. That's the shadow Jung warned us about. It's not just the dark in you. It's the part that had to go dark, because light wasn't safe. And the longer it stays unseen, the more it influences your adult life. It becomes the reason you sabotage relationships, the reason you chase validation, the reason you can't sit in stillness, the reason you lash out, shut down, or lose yourself in addiction. And worst of all, you blame yourself for it. But Jung knew. The shadow is not a mistake. It's a map. It's a record of what had to be hidden for you to survive. And if you follow it, if you have the courage to face it, it will lead you back to the truth of who you are. But before that, there must be grief. You must grieve the childhood you didn't get, the unconditional love you deserved, the safety that never came, the moments you felt completely alone in a house full of people. And this grief, it's not weakness. It's a sacred threshold. It means the spell is breaking. The silence is ending. You are no longer protecting those who hurt you, at the expense of your own becoming. And it's terrifying, because to confront this is to admit, your parents were wrong. Your childhood was not normal, and what you went through affected everything. But this is where individuation begins. Individuation, to Jung, wasn't self-improvement. It was a soul reclamation. The slow, painful return of all your exiled parts. Not to change them, but to love them into wholeness. You don't do this work to shame your past. You do it to stop it from controlling your future. Because as long as that childhood wound stays buried, you'll keep bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You'll keep reenacting your early trauma. In partners, in work, in your relationship with yourself. You'll keep trying to prove your worth, instead of realizing it was never lost. And here's the paradox. The wound that once broke you, is also the portal to your power. Because when you face it, feel it, own it, you become conscious, and the unconscious can no longer control you. This is the essence of Jung's wisdom. Your suffering isn't random. It's a summons, a call to return, a call to remember yourself. Piece by piece, pain by pain. You're not here to fix what your parents broke. You're here to become what they couldn't. You are the cycle breaker, the lineage liberator, the one who said, "It ends with me." And for that, you will be misunderstood. You will feel alone. You will grieve a life you never even lived. But you will also become real. Not a mask. Not a performance. Not a trauma response. Just you. And that is everything your younger self ever wanted. You grow up, but the wound doesn't. It waits, patiently, beneath your accomplishments. Beneath the mask of "I'm fine." Beneath the roles you perform so well. And then life starts to mirror you. The unspoken begins to echo everywhere. You fall in love, and suddenly you're a child again. Yearning, fearing, testing, clinging. Your partner becomes the parent you could never reach. You either chase them, or run before they can abandon you. At work, you over-deliver and under-rest. You're terrified of disappointing anyone. Praise feels like oxygen, criticism, a death sentence. Your boss becomes the voice you tried so hard to please. In friendships, you keep giving. You carry other people's emotions as if they were your own. You never want to be a burden because you were taught that you were one. These aren't quirks. These are trauma adaptations. Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the quiet tragedy of toxic family systems. They don't just shape your past. They write the script for your future until you rewrite it. But how do you rewrite something you never consented to write in the first place? You begin by telling the truth. And not the polite truth. Not that they did their best truth. But the raw, ugly, human truth. That love in your house had strings attached. That your feelings were too big for them. That you were punished for being authentic. That love came with silence, control, shame, or worse, absence. This is not about blame. It's about clarity. Because when you see it clearly, you stop romanticizing the dysfunction. You stop calling it normal. You stop recreating it in your adult life. And that clarity begins to wake up something ancient in you. Something Carl Jung called the self. Not the ego, not the mask, but the deep, sovereign soul of who you are. The self carries your wholeness, your instincts, your archetypal memory. It's what calls you toward healing, toward remembering. But the ego doesn't like change. The ego was built to survive the dysfunction, so it fears anything that threatens the old story. It will say, "Don't stir up the past. Maybe you're just being dramatic. They had it harder than you." This is the internalized parent voice, the inner critic, the psychic residue of your conditioning. And if you listen to it, you'll spend your life editing yourself to be acceptable to people who never even saw you. But the moment you question it, a rupture begins. You begin to break the spell. You start noticing how much of your life was built on coping, not choosing. You see that your perfectionism is a trauma response, that your emotional numbness is self-protection, that your high standards are actually fear in disguise. You begin to understand why you can't rest, why you feel unsafe when things are calm, why chaos feels like home, because home was chaos. You just didn't have the words for it. Carl Jung taught that in order to grow, we must confront our own darkness. Not to be consumed by it, but to integrate it. This is shadow work. But what is the shadow in the context of toxic families? It's the parts of you that were exiled to maintain belonging. Your needs, your voice, your anger, your playfulness, your grief. You tucked them away to keep the peace, to avoid rejection, to survive. And the cost? You became a half version of yourself, a curated mask, a person built on apology. Shadow work is not just about discovering your dark side. It's about reclaiming the light that was forbidden. It's about saying, "I deserve to feel. I deserve to speak. I deserve to take up space." But here's the hard truth. When you start reclaiming these parts, your family might not like it, because you're disrupting the system. You're breaking roles they never asked you to break. You were the quiet one, the golden child, the caretaker, the success story. Now you're telling the truth? Now you're setting boundaries? Now you're saying that what happened wasn't okay. That's rebellion. That's heresy. That's threatening to those who are still asleep. And so, you may be rejected again. You may be guilt-tripped. You may be called ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. But you're not any of those things. You're becoming conscious. And becoming conscious in an unconscious family is like waking up in the middle of a play and realizing you don't want to act anymore. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop shrinking. And that's when the real grief begins. Because you realize the family you needed never existed. That's a death. The death of an illusion. But from that death comes rebirth. The birth of a new relationship with yourself. One rooted not in shame, but sovereignty. You begin to parent yourself in the way you always needed. You become your own witness, your own protector, your own nurturer. This is what Jung meant when he said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." You are not just a product of your past. You are the potential of your healing. And healing doesn't mean your parents change. It means you do. You stop expecting them to give what they never had. You stop contorting yourself to be loved. You stop mistaking trauma bonding for connection. And you start becoming real. Not perfect, not healed overnight, but real, rooted, awake, unapologetically whole. And that is the beginning of freedom. You've begun the healing. But now something unexpected happens. You start to feel worse. Not better, not lighter, not freer, worse. Because healing isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, dragging you deeper before it lifts you higher. You thought awareness would bring peace. But instead it brings grief, anger, even rage. You begin to see clearly how much was stolen from you. How much of your childhood was survival wrapped in silence. And now you can't unsee it. You look at old photos and see a child who was already pretending, already adapting, already learning that being yourself wasn't safe. This is the phase Jung understood better than most. The confrontation with the shadow. Because once you begin awakening, your shadow doesn't disappear. It emerges. It storms the surface, desperate to be seen, heard, integrated. You might find yourself crying without knowing why, or erupting in anger that feels disproportionate. You might withdraw, isolate, feel numb. This is the emotional debris of everything you suppressed. Years, maybe decades, of unprocessed pain bubbling up all at once. You're not broken. You're thawing. Your nervous system, once frozen for safety, is now defrosting. You're remembering what it means to feel. And that can be terrifying, because in toxic families, emotion was the enemy. Crying made you weak. Anger made you dangerous. Needs made you too much. So now, as those emotions rise, your inner child flinches. She still thinks she'll be punished for being real. That's why this part of the journey feels like self-sabotage. You start sabotaging relationships that feel safe, because they feel unfamiliar. You start craving chaos, because peace feels suspicious. You might even miss the toxic dynamics, because they were predictable. This is not failure. This is rewiring. Jung believed that all true transformation involved tension. The tension of opposites, he called it, the war between the old self and the emerging self. And during this war, you will feel like you're losing your mind. You'll question if healing is worth it. You'll want to go back to numbness, to pleasing, to performing. Because healing hurts. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're finally doing it right. You are meeting the parts of you that were never welcomed. You are saying to them, you get to exist now. And that terrifies your old identity. The good girl, the peacemaker, the golden child, the scapegoat. They don't want to die. They can't die, not yet. They will cling. They will scream. They will seduce you back into silence. But silence is no longer your home. And here's the hardest part. Your family may resent this version of you. They might say, you've changed. You're too sensitive. Why bring up the past? They want the old you back. The agreeable one. The one who didn't ask for boundaries. The one who laughed off the pain. But you've seen too much now. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. This is what Jung meant by individuation. The process of becoming a whole, unique individual. Instead of a product of family expectation. It's not rebellion for the sake of it. It's reclamation. You're reclaiming your emotions. Your voice. Your right to say, that hurt me. Your right to say, no more. And yes, it will cost you. You might lose relationships. You might lose your place in the family system. You might feel like a stranger in your own bloodline. but what you gain is you. And that's everything. This confrontation with the shadow isn't just internal. It's relational. Your new awareness exposes the unhealed parts of others. It becomes a mirror they don't want to look into. So they project. They gaslight. They minimize. They deflect. You're too emotional. You remember it wrong. You're making things up. This is the family system protecting itself. Because if they validate your pain, they'd have to feel their own. And many simply aren't ready. That's not your responsibility. Your healing is not a family project. It's a personal revolution. One that takes time. One that requires boundaries. One that demands you choose yourself again and again. But in the darkest moments, when you feel alone, misunderstood, even punished for awakening, remember this. You're not the problem. You're the pattern breaker. You are the one brave enough to stop the inheritance of pain, to meet your shadow instead of passing it on. That is sacred work, and the sacred is rarely comfortable. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." The pain you feel now is the price of becoming real. And unlike the pain of the past, this pain is purposeful. It's not about shame. It's not about silence. It's not about staying small. It's about emerging, becoming, waking up from the sleep of generational programming. You are doing what your ancestors could not. You are grieving what they didn't have the language for. You are feeling what they were forced to suppress. You are freeing what they tried to survive. That makes you the beginning of something new. And yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's thankless. Yes, it hurts. But so did pretending. So did shrinking. So did trying to earn love by disappearing. You've chosen the harder path. But it's also the path of truth. And truth, even when it burns, is the only thing that heals. You've looked into the darkness. And it didn't destroy you. It revealed you. Not the version of you shaped by silence. Not the persona polished for approval. But the raw, radiant self beneath it all. You see now that the wound didn't make you weak. It made you watchful. It made you honest. It made you real in a world addicted to pretending. That's what Carl Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment isn't light beams and bliss. It's brutal. It's a breakdown before the breakthrough. It's sitting with your rage, your grief, your emptiness, and saying, "I will not run from you anymore." That choice, to stay with yourself, is what ends the cycle. Because toxic families teach you to abandon yourself, to lie, to pacify, to numb. Healing teaches you to return, to feel your anger without becoming it, to hold your sadness without drowning in it, to know your worth even when no one claps for you. You realize now that you were never too sensitive. You were perceptive. You were never too needy. You were longing for the love you deserved. You were never broken. You were brave. That child inside you, the one who tiptoed around moods, who flinched at criticism, who learned to read silence like a language. He never needed to be fixed. He needed to be believed. And now you believe him. That is the miracle. That is reparenting. That is integration. You no longer gaslight yourself. You no longer try to earn your place. You no longer confuse loyalty with self-abandonment. You become the parent you needed, the witness, the nurturer, the protector. And from that place, you stop needing to be understood by those who never tried. You no longer go to the dry well expecting water. You stop explaining yourself to the emotionally unavailable. You stop asking the blind to see you. You stop waiting for someone to give you permission to exist. You take up space. That's individuation. Not rebellion, but remembrance. Not separation for its own sake, but wholeness. You are no longer seeking exile from your family. You are simply refusing to exile yourself. You may still carry scars, but they no longer define you. They inform you. They warn you. They guide you. The wound, once hidden in shame, becomes sacred. It becomes the very portal through which your soul grows. This is the paradox Jung understood so well, that our greatest suffering can become our greatest strength. He called it the wounded healer, the archetype of one who has descended into their own darkness, and come back not as a savior, but as a guide, not perfect, not without pain, but embodied, someone who has met their own soul, and now walks the world differently. You may become that for others, not by fixing them, not by preaching, but by being. Your presence, grounded, honest, awake. becomes a permission slip for others to do the same. You're no longer driven by proving, pleasing, or pretending. You're no longer building a life around the fear of being too much. You are living from your center. And from there, you love differently. You set boundaries without guilt. You rest without shame. You speak without apology. Your past may still echo, but it no longer dictates. The roles you were cast in, scapegoat, hero, invisible one, they no longer own you. You've stepped off the stage. You're writing your own script now. And that script includes joy. Not performative joy, but real, earned joy. The kind that comes from being seen by yourself. The kind that doesn't need to be explained or defended. And yes, it's quieter, less dramatic, more subtle, but it's true. And that truth heals in ways approval never could. You might find new family, not by blood, but by resonance. People who speak your emotional language, who hold space instead of judgment, who remind you of who you are when you forget. This is the soul family, the chosen people of the chosen self. You're no longer chasing belonging. You're becoming the kind of person who naturally creates it. And that is the final gift of the wound. It becomes your soul. The very thing that broke you now makes you unbreakable. The parts you hid now make you whole. And the past you feared becomes the path you walk with grace. So here's your final reminder. You are not what they couldn't love. You are not the version of you they forced into silence. You are not the failure to make them proud. You are the one who turned pain into power, shame into sovereignty, and wounding into wisdom. And that is sacred. So walk now, not as the child needing to be chosen, but as the adult who has chosen yourself. The journey doesn't end here, but it begins again, with eyes open, heart steady, and soul intact. Subscribe to the Awakened Compass and join our membership to unlock the full journey within.